KCCI 8 News. This is a Project Community Special, Racism in Sports.
Welcome. Tonight I'm filling in for Elgin Rucker, but let me be clear that this is his vision. This is a vision that transcends the reality of just competition and the sports culture. This surrounds conversations of transparency, accountability, and the impact of a culture shift within collegiate sports that needs to continue moving forward. How do you see college athletes? As a jersey, an extension of the colors on the college flag you hang outside your house or on your car? Do you really know who these players are, their frustrations, what it's like for them to be black or to have fans that they feel like only care about them when they bring you a win? To relive those glory days and feed egos in competition. Let's get real. Let's step into the lens. This is Elgin Rucker's Project Community, Racism in Sports, and we began with the recent upheaval at the University of Iowa. Here's KCCI Sports Director Scott Reister.
It started with former players speaking out on Twitter. On June 5th, former Hawkeye James Daniels tweeted out, "There are too many racial disparities in the Hawkeye football program. Black players have been treated unfairly for far too long." That tweet opened the floodgates to around 50 former players sharing similar feelings. Many comments expressed frustrations about the conduct of strength coach Chris Doyle, who reached a settlement to leave his position 10 days later. For the players, it ultimately led to an environment where they say they can finally share their feelings to create positive change.
And with the players being able to speak up for us, I mean, that just opened up a huge window for, everything to be able to happen. And now it's our part as players to be able to voice our opinions.
Ivory Kelly Martin is a team leader who is breathing easier than he was in years past.
This feeling where you have to walk on eggshells, where you really couldn't, be yourself, or when you heard something, you wasn't able to really say it because maybe you would get attacked too at times. There's definitely a whole entire morale change. There's a whole entire change to how it was then and how it is now.
The majority of the people in the building are the players. So I would say we need to speak up more. If we see something, I would never put all the blame on Coach Ferentz. He is not able to see all these things. We see everything. It's as us as leaders, as captains, to speak up on what we see, what can improve.
The biggest question to me is, why the blind spot? And, what things didn't I miss? And it kind of ties into some things we've talked about. The former players were very forthcoming. They were very direct. The key here is to try to create an environment where everybody feels free to talk and say their mind and know that it's going to be weighed and valued and measured.
Former players will make up an advisory board to increase communication.
Yeah, this is a very critical time for us. What can we do to help?
Players can now use Twitter. Kevon Merriweather tweeted out some strong words. "If you cannot support us right now with this movement and with our team taking a knee during the national anthem, do not support us during the football season. Do not watch our games on TV. Do not come to us when you want photos. Do not ask us to give your kids autographs. Do not come to us expecting us to do for you when you can't support the black athletes on this team and the decisions we make as a team." The team has not decided what it will do during the national anthem, and Merriweather may have gotten many angry comments, but it's the many more supportive ones he's taking to heart.
Support from the Iowa fans was truly amazing. I had more positive comments than I had negative, and that really showed that the amount of support that this team has from the Iowa fans, from the Iowa community.
Anybody that leaves here with a bad experience or anybody that leaves here without a degree, that's a failure for our program.
Both Ferentz,
my responsibility, I'm the head coach,
and AD Gary Barta are taking responsibility.
If you felt mistreated, misled, discriminated against, whatever the case, I truly am sorry.
The conversations have been ongoing, and they say the trust is there.
Also with our coaches and our fans, and I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to create something big this year.
A couple things came up from the task force report last year that I heard. All right, we allowed them to wear hats, earrings, all that stuff. But what I've learned here is there's a lot more to it.
Barta says he trusts Ferentz to lead the program. Will Doyle be the only coach to depart the staff? The independent review is ongoing, and Barta says he will take appropriate action based on its findings.
This Project Community Special will focus on brave black college athletes who took the time to talk about their experiences and represent their black teammates, black student athletes in the state of Iowa, and black student athletes at predominantly white universities. Here's who you'll hear from. David Carr, a wrestler at Iowa State University and 2020 Big 12 champion. Kiara Collier, who plays on the Drake University women's basketball team. Alfonso Lambert, a member of the University of Northern Iowa football team. Natalie Nelson is a swimmer at the University of Northern Iowa. And Gabrielle Orr, who plays volleyball at the University of Iowa. Lastly, Cross Robinson, Drake football. These athletes are sharing their stories, their experiences, and their struggle with just being themselves. They know who they are. The question is, what do you see when you see them? But before you answer, listen. Here's Elgin Rucker's Project Community, Racism in Sports.
So a very diverse group here tonight, not really by race, but you know what I mean. That's the whole point. The discussion that we're about to have is very important for so many reasons, and I hope that we can just, again, speak with a sense of openness, honesty, and transparency. I know this is probably different than anything you likely have done before. Maybe it isn't, but either way, we can only hope to make a difference after this conversation and through this conversation if we're telling it how it is. I'm a former athlete, and I'll always be a Black man, so I get it, but we need people who don't have these experiences to get it. So I wanted to share my screen and show you something that I saw on Twitter that I thought was really, really moving and really powerful by a young athlete at University of North Carolina, Diami Brown, and he tweeted this photo of him in the stands, obviously surrounded by fans, and he said, "Sometimes I think this is the only time they really care about me." And when I saw that, it was one of those things where it kind of just hits you immediately, right? Like, man, to sit there and to be in that moment with those fans and to be enjoying that because it's something that you wanted to be a part of, something that you worked so hard to be able to do. But then when you go back and you reflect on what's going on right now, it kind of doesn't even feel the same. So I wanted to try to get responses from everyone, really, as far as when you see that and you think about what that could mean for him and what that might have meant for you at any time period. Just talk about those experiences and dealing with that.
I'm from Minnesota, so a lot of the volleyball teams I was on, I was usually the only Black girl. So then obviously we'd have our fans and, you know, people that supported us, but I never knew if they just supported me or if they supported my entire community. And that's still like present for me right now at Iowa. We have 3 Black girls on our team, and sometimes it just feels like if they didn't know us personally, if they would think something completely different about us.
I can completely relate to that. I'm the only Black girl on my team. And it's really, like, during that moment, it's really easy to forget that we are, like, the only Black student athletes, or like you said, there's only 3 of you, I think you said. But I know for me personally, I just, I don't know, I think about it a lot more than I think some people may. And so it's hard, especially like at Drake. Most of our fans are white, and so are most of the student athletes. So it's something that I think about a lot, and I don't like, it is hard to know if like they only support us because we're good at what we do, or if they like us for who we are as people.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with both of them. On Drake's football team, at any given moment, it could be like 80 to 90 guys on the team, and right now there's only 5. Black dudes on the team. So me and the dudes who are on the team that are Black, we talk about it all the time. Like it's a daily thing that we mention at least one time. And for the most part, we stick together in meetings. We usually sit together and stuff like that. And it's not like we don't interact with the rest of the team, but it's like, we have difficulties, and we feel like we've had difficulties being at an all-white school, especially being Black, that we have because we're Black. And so, we've basically come to the conclusion that if we didn't stick together, we'd probably, leave, because it's difficult. It's a difficult task. So that's something also and I did see that tweet. That's something also that crossed my mind. And said, would I really have, all of the white friends and the Caucasian friends that I had if I didn't play football? So that's how I think of it.
And I want to kind of pick up where you left off on something that you said that I think really stuck with me, how you felt like you guys had to stick together. There's no other way that you feel like you could survive without doing that. I kind of want to pivot it to Alfonso and David and to Natalie. Have you ever felt that way? Like, you gotta find that community within the team, and how do you go about managing both, because you want to be there and be present with the whole team. At the same time, there's different things that you specifically need for it to be comfortable for you.
Yeah, for me, you know, that's kind of a big thing because you know, it's gonna be a lot of stuff that like some of my teammates, white teammates, they not gonna understand. Like I can't talk to them about everything because they just never been through it, just because that's just how it is. And you know, a lot of people grow up from Iowa, like a lot of my teammates from Iowa, so you know, they grew up in small towns, and you know, their first time seeing a black kid is on the football team we on now. So it's like, you know, how can I be comfortable in that situation where, you know, you're not even familiarized with this, with me as a person?
For me, it's just like I'm the only one now on our team, and like I feel like sometimes I have a hard time like talking to my, like even my roommates about it. Like they're super like standoffish and like don't really know like sometimes what to say, or like they don't really get it. So yeah, we've had other girls on our team that were like mixed, and so like that's been nice, but they've kind of been a little like shy and like don't really like ever really want to talk. So that's kind of sucked because I'm very like vocal and it's just me. So
Words hold power. When we come back, you'll hear about the impact of words they hear too often, and if these athletes truly feel valued. Elgin's conversation continues next on Project Community: Racism in Sport. You're watching a KCCI News special, Project Community: Racism in Sports. Right now, I want you to think about a special place to you, somewhere you worked hard and earned the right to be in. Would you be frustrated if people in that same place question how you got there because you didn't look like them? That's been the experience for some of these black college athletes. KCCI's Elgin Rucker asked them about microaggressions they've encountered because of their race.
We talked about seeing that photo, right, with the athlete in the stands and feeling like the fans aren't really supporting him in every aspect of his life. I can only imagine why he feels that way, right? What are the personal experiences that he might have felt or gone through, either as a collegiate athlete or just leading up to the point that he is in life, to where he feels like the reason why I feel this way is because I've heard a fan say something, or I've heard a fan do something to another teammate of mine, or I've lived through going home and not being able to celebrate a win because I saw something that I didn't like, and I saw something that I knew was only based off the color of my skin. I'm curious if any of you guys have ever had an experience like that, or witnessed an experience like that. Like I said, not even just collegiately, but just in your entire experience of being a student athlete.
For some reason in our sport, they'll be like, oh, he's like, he'll get tired because he's, I don't know, let's say like chocolate melts, or like black people get tired like in the third period for wrestling and stuff like that. And I remember someone had said something like that in our team, and me and this other guy were the only one backing it up and like saying that's not like true or whatever. And everyone on the team was kind of like, didn't want to voice their opinion on it, or like we're kind of chill about it. So it's just like little things like that I remember like stands out to me.
For me, it's a lot of microaggressions. Usually not anything like big that's ever happened to me volleyball wise, but just like, oh, you must jump high because you're black. Like that is the completely wrong thing to say, you know? And it's really the microaggressions that I see a lot of, where it's just, I don't know if they know or not if they should say that, but they should learn that it's not the place. And it's very rude, honestly.
I'm with you on that. The whole underhand compliments like that really gets me, because I'm be like, okay, oh, you smart for a black guy and stuff like that. I'm like, dog, my color of my skin has nothing to do with my brain. Like that is completely like things like that will really make me want to, all right, now I'm finna get on your head, because that's not what this is. Because that things like that is just, and they may not think it's an underhand compliment, because again, it's still a compliment to them. But at the same time, like, that's just not the right thing to say. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I could agree with both of them. And just even like out of college. So while I've been home and stuff, I have a job or whatever. And every time I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I'll talk to my coworkers. I'm like, yeah, I have to go back to school. So they go, oh, you go to school? I'm like, yeah, I go to college. And they're like, oh, where do you go? And then I'm like, Drake. They go, oh, really? Like, me going to school was like a stretch because I'm Black. I'm like, no. And then I tell them I play a sport, and they're like, oh, like, then that's when the microaggressions come and they say all these underhand comments. I'm like, okay, that's not even like needed, like just little things like that. So
for sports, like for wrestling, even just the way the announcers like describe Black athletes versus how they describe like other athletes, they'll be like, oh, he's explosive, he's naturally talented, or he's just like way above, or he's made in a lab, or stuff like that, or like compliments. But it's not like instead of just saying like, oh, he's just naturally talented, or not a lot of people can do that. Like it's skill, it's technique, it's stuff that you practice over and over in the room. It's not just like, oh, I'm Black, so I can do this skill, or I can do this a certain way. It's just it's not practice, it's a skill, just like someone else has done it. It's just technique.
Yeah, I would agree with all of you on that. And one thing that I've experienced is kind of like similar to Kira's experience. Like when back home people ask, "Oh, do you go to school?" And I say, "Yeah." Like, "Oh, okay." There's like kind of a little bit of surprise, and then they immediately follow the question of, well, "Do you play sports there?" And then once I say I play football, they're like, "Oh, okay." You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, it makes sense now why you go to school because you play football. It's just kind of like it's just discouraging how that justifies me going to school. Like almost like I couldn't be a regular student.
Next, the power of stereotypes and how they can turn dangerous. Elgin asks these athletes about their experiences outside of sports and how they had to adjust in our society because of the color of their skin. That's next on Project Community: Racism in Sports.
I'm walking around and people will look at me, look at the shirt, look at me and be like, oh, y'all basketball team, y'all had a good win last night. At first it was frustrating, but it's normal to me now. When you define any kind of stereotype, you always have to be like the person who's normalizing something. You don't even know you're doing it, you just existed.
Dwindled to a stereotype. Unfortunately, it's a common denominator in the Black culture. Bayo Phillips' story is one of many experiences that exist in the sports world. And as you're about to hear, they can be much worse than assuming the wrong sport.
And I didn't mention the word, but that all stems around these stereotypes that can definitely have severe racial undertones depending on how they're expressed. In regard to how Black people have been treated in our society, discrimination, denial of opportunity, violence, especially violence with what we've seen how those stereotypes can be hurtful or frustrating, like in your case, but also dangerous, like in Ahmaud Arbery's case or Breonna Taylor's case, and all these countless victims of, when you go back to the base and the root of what happened, it's based off a stereotype. Does that scare you guys to know that you've been dealing with these microaggressions that in the wrong setting can turn from a microaggression into a major issue that's a threat to your life?
Definitely. I mean, I have been scared to get pulled over ever since I've been driving. And so that's like the main thing that goes through my head. But even at these protests that I've been attending in Iowa City, I do get nervous. I mean, and so I don't think a lot of the white protesters feel the same way that I do, because they will do a lot of stuff that it's great, because I'm very glad that they're there and supporting us. But I know I couldn't do that because I could be the next person.
yeah, I definitely am also scared. And personally, I haven't gone to any protests because I am scared, because I'm like, just being there could give them a reason to be like, oh, she did something to where we felt the need to do this. So just like in the driving thing, I can completely relate to. I mean, there's just so many things that I'm like, I can't do that because I'm Black, where some of my friends might be like, oh yeah, let's do this. And I'm like, yeah, I can't get away with that just because of the color of my skin.
That stuff's really tough, man. And you know, it's hard to talk about, but it's necessary to talk about. And at the same time, I think we're starting to evolve past the point where it's our duty to consistently educate and tell people how to become allies. I think we've been dealing with this problem for a very long time. I know. And it's not like these instances that we're seeing now, it's not like George Floyd should be a wake-up call. This alarm has been going off for a very long time. Y'all just been hitting snooze every single time. And now finally, Black people have had enough. And so I'm wondering how you feel being in your particular situations, having so many people around you that don't look like you, your teammates, your coaches, down to the trainers, down to the fans, how frustrating it might be to feel like you have to consistently educate other people who could otherwise educate themselves.
Like I had mentioned earlier, I find it, you know, like I said earlier, I'm very frustrated with many of my teammates for being silent. And it's not something that I feel like I should have to do, but at the end of the day, you know, I don't want to be on the team that have, you know, built up resentment for, you know, the majority portion of my team. So I feel like once I get more of my emotions under check, I will reach out to people and, you know, kind of ask why they haven't spoken up, or ask what they do need, you know, more educating on. But that's something I feel like I'm going to have to wait for the time for, because right now I feel like it's a little bit too touchy, and I'm definitely a little bit too frustrated to, you know, go to educate somebody and end up getting into an argument. So.
Yeah, personally, I'm honestly tired because I don't feel like as Black people, we should have to explain to people what it's like to be Black. Like, there are more than enough resources for people to go out and educate themselves. Us Black people, we don't have to educate ourselves on what it's like to be white. We know what white people have to do to their hair. We know what their culture's like. Like, we shouldn't have to constantly be like, yeah, so for me to get my hair done, I have to do this. They have more than enough resources to understand what it's like to be Black, or somewhat understand, because they will never fully understand. But they choose not to, and they use us as resources because they don't care to learn more about us, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree completely with that, because, like, with that, like, I don't want to have to feel like I have to I'm forcing you to learn something that you don't even care about, that, like, you should want to learn. Like, you know, you deal with so many of these people, like, you should want to learn that. But if you're not even trying to learn that, like, why should I put my effort into trying to educate you on something that you don't even care about? Like, that's not my job. I'm not a teacher. I didn't sign up to do that. Like, that's my problem with that.
I feel like I have a hard time reaching out to people that haven't reached out because I don't want to, like, push them. Like, I'd rather them come and, like, have a conversation with me and, like, be really open about it, rather than, like, forcing it and, like, having to, like, inform them about things. Like, I'd much rather just, like, if we just were sitting and having a conversation and, like, everyone participate, and, like, I feel way more comfortable doing that.
Next, the unrest in America right now. Elgin asked these Iowa athletes how the teams they play for are handling the current conversation, and whether they're doing enough to support them.
You can love the similarities between two people, but you also have to respect the differences. Respect them as a human being. And above all, race, gender, ethnicity, you know, we are humans, and we are more of the same than you think. And to not respect the difference between you and someone else, and you can't even respect the skin color, I think that's atrocious, and I think there's no room for it, and there's no room for racism at all in the world.
That was George Niang, a former Iowa State basketball player currently with the Utah Jazz. He knows what it's like to be black and compete in a state that's mostly white. The current national conversation has created a shift and some raw discussion for college athletes in Iowa with the same experiences. KCCI's Elgin Rucker continues this conversation, asking this group of athletes whether they're getting the support they need.
The team that you're on, the people around you, your teammates, your coaches, has what's going on now in our society, especially when you think about how, you can possibly see yourself in these people that are going through what they're going through. How has that been, and has that had an adverse effect on how you look at some of the people that are around you, or how you go about doing certain things? And I'll caveat that with a personal experience of mine. So I live here, obviously, which is a predominantly white state, and in my neighborhood, it's mostly white people around me. So I'm used to going jogging, and I never really have any issues with that. I don't really, mind getting out there. Everybody else is doing it. Why not me? Why would I hold myself back in that regard? But I find myself having a hard time putting on those shoes now without being able to think about someone like Ahmaud Arbery, who doesn't have that opportunity anymore. And I haven't been jogging in a month because of that, because it's just so difficult to pick those jogging shoes up and look at them the same way. And that's just an object, right? Now I'm going into work, and it's hard to look at certain people a certain way because you haven't spoken up about it, but we've been dealing with this for not just this week and just this month, but for a very long time. And everybody is hurting. And I know we're probably all pretty aware of some of the difficulties we're seeing with the Iowa football program and how that's a big part of the problem in their program. So I'm wondering if this has been a harder experience to be, like you said, comfortable in and around these people that you just in your core don't understand what's really happening to people that you resonate with.
Frustrated with a number of my teammates because of their silence. To me, at this point, I feel like it's personally unacceptable. Just because of how, it's literally everywhere. You get on your phone, you go on Twitter, whatever social media, you definitely see it first. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but just this last semester, Trump came to Drake and had a rally or whatever. And a bunch of my teammates were quick to post the rally. They went to the rally, they was all excited. You know what I'm saying? So I know you pay attention to politics, and now in a time of need where people like me need your support, you're silent. So it's like that's where, to me, it's really, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth with a number of people, and it's frustrating, honestly. So
that's real.
That's all.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I think.
Yeah. So my team we actually had a talk about it, and for the most part, everyone talked. There was one person who didn't talk, and I didn't know if she didn't talk because she just was not educated on anything, or I don't know it. And that's where it rubbed me the wrong way, because I didn't know why she didn't talk. And I felt like if we're going to have real authentic conversation about what's going on, then everyone needs to speak up, even if you don't understand. Like, you need to express that you are not educated. And that was really frustrating for me, for her to just be there and not even care to say anything. But everyone's not the same, I guess. But I don't know. Everyone else on my team was pretty good with it, and it was nice to have people actually ask questions. But the biggest thing that was expressed from me, being the only Black person on the team, was white people and people who are not of color educating themselves on what it's like being Black in America, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to somewhat understand what we go through.
The conversation continues in just 2 minutes. Pledging allegiance to America, an America that is supposed to protect you, is not the Black experience. The significance of using platforms and the difficult conversations around teammates and friends. Keep watching this KCCI 8 News special, Project Community: Racism in Sports.
It has been a difficult time for our country, in particular, Black people in our country. First, my condolences to families of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and all the families who have endured police brutality. We, the National Football League, condemn racism and the systematic oppression of Black people. We, the National Football League, admit we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encourage all to speak out and peacefully protest. We, the National Football League, believe Black Lives Matter.
The first step is acknowledgement. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell acknowledged the evolution that is happening right now. He acknowledged racism, oppression, and police brutality, but his support wasn't always clear. When former player Colin Kaepernick used his platform to kneel against police brutality, that was all but welcomed. Regardless of how that moment was perceived at the time, that kneel made a difference, arguably now more than ever. Elgin Rucker continues the honest conversation on the importance of platform and listening.
My biggest problem on my team right now is just like that's really been like I've been having problems with is just the fact that nobody want to acknowledge it. Like, you know, it's cool. Like, I understand like everybody has different morals and stuff, but you know, if my team is half the team is, you know, Black, and then, you know, we got everybody saying, oh, we're a family and, you know, we need to be a family and, you know, that's how we should operate. But, you know, if you can't even acknowledge that, like, what type of family is that? Like, you can't acknowledge something that's affecting half your team members. Like, what? That's not no family to me. And, like, that's really been my problem. And it's just, it makes me look at other players a different way because I'm like, you know, I can be going through something because of this situation, but you not even acknowledge it because, and I understand racism is, you know, it's a hard topic for a lot of people because, you know, it's just one of the things that people want to push under the rug, but it's too late for all that. Like, you've been doing that for too long. Something needs to happen.
I feel like I'm getting super frustrated. Like, when, like, on my team, people will, like, post something on social media, like, trying to be supportive, and then they, like, can't, like, when we talk, like, some of us will be talking about it, and, like, they, like, won't say a word, or they'll, like, walk in, and it's, like, super awkward for them. Like, I'm, like, my roommates, we were talking about it, and then some of them walked in, and, like, they, like, won't even say a word to me about it, or, like, ask about it, and, like, one of my roommates is from Minnesota, like, Minneapolis, and, like, we were talking about it, and, like, caring, and it just feels like they're, like, supporting on social media for, like, the good of it, but, like, at the same time, like, they can't even, like, talk to me about it, and I'm like your best friend. Like, it just frustrates me because I'm like, you should be able to talk to me about this. We can talk about everything, and, like, you're my teammate, you know me very well, and, like, you're posting and you're saying you're supporting, but, like, I don't feel it because you can't even, like, have a conversation.
Yeah, I would agree with that for my team. I mean, there was a lot of people that reached out and were very supportive right away, but there was a lot of people that didn't say anything until I said something to the group. And so after that, it kind of just felt like they were following a script. And they were saying, like, we support you. I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner. I didn't know what to say. And I understand that, but it's the same script that I've been getting from people. And I would appreciate it way more if everyone was just saying what was on their mind. And I've made it very obvious that I would love to educate anyone about anything they want to know. And I mean, a lot of people on my team are taking me up on it, but there are some that will just send I support you, I'd love to learn more, but will not follow up on that.
Yeah, from my team, I feel like they haven't even, like, shown, I mean, some people on my team, but not a lot of them have, like, shown that it's affected them or have even reached out to me. But you know, I really look at, like, what they post or what they like, and that, like, speaks volumes to me, like, that they're, like, I'm looking through what they're looking at. I know they're on Instagram and Twitter and all this stuff, but they're not, like, sharing anything or posting anything or even, like, ask me about it. I think maybe one or two of my teammates have really asked me about it or talked to me about it. And even they were like, oh, I feel uncomfortable talking about it. I don't really want to talk about it. I'm like, that's the problem. You know, you want to talk about it. And that's pretty much, like, my job, I feel like, is just to educate them and, like, try to have more of those conversations, and then hopefully we can have, like, a meeting about it with my team and just kind of talk to them more about it.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting when you say you've had some teammates say that they've felt uncomfortable talking about it, as if to say, they're more uncomfortable than you to have that conversation.
And for them, it's like, I know like some of my friends, they're like, oh yeah, I don't really get into that or look at that too much. I'm like, you're not getting into it or looking about it or like talking about it because it's not affecting you personally, but it's affecting me. And like, you should want to care that much to learn about it and talk about it because I'm a friend and you shouldn't like me just because I'm good at wrestling or good at this. You should like me for who I am. And if I need to talk to someone about it or like express that, you should care that much and learn about it and educate yourself so you're able to have that conversation.
And I agree with what he just said. Another thing that I wanted to add is that like, it's really making me look at a lot of my teammates like, what's really good with you? Like, what is your true character? Because, you know what I'm saying? The way I view it is, it's so blatant right now. I should not have to explain to you. Like, I shouldn't have to dumb down the situation to explain to you as to why I don't deserve to die for no reason. And it's like, it's killing me that people are just not getting, it's so remedial. Like, the concept is remedial. And with me, I'm really getting frustrated is because I know, like, it's getting to the point where I know people understand it. They're just pretending like they don't, or they, you know, they don't want to understand it. But it's like, I know you do. And it's getting to a point where I feel like I'm going to have to start, cutting certain people out of my space because, you've shown where your heart lies at this point. So I mean, it just is what it is.
Do you guys feel like it's, when we try to find the root of the problem here, why is it so hard for people that this doesn't directly affect to understand? Do you feel like it's deeper than just race relations? Is it more so because of the politics side of things and how people try to spin that? I've also seen a lot of people say that they feel like the media is controlling this narrative and trying to make people believe that this is happening more to Black people than it is to the entire world. And they think that this is a political stunt too. I don't know how deep into politics you guys are, but do you feel like that plays a part into it?
Right now, I think a lot of people are either left or right, and they don't understand that this is a human rights issue and not a political issue. And so I think that people look at it as, oh, if my friends are Republican and I'm Republican, but I stand up for something that is looked at as being more liberal, then they're going to think that I'm being like too soft or something like that. And people really just need to know it's a human rights issue.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, some people be taking this way out of what it's actually for. Like, it's for, even like when you pertain to like taking a knee for the flag, like that has nothing to do with the military. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. It's just, America's supposed to stand for freedom, everybody's equal and all this, that, the other. But, when somebody take a knee, you're mad about it because you think it's dishonoring the military and things of that sort when it's nothing like that. And people just be stuck on their own ideas and I wouldn't say refuse to learn, but don't be open to really listening to what people are saying. And that's just a big problem with what's going on.
Yeah, and I find it real interesting when you talk about the flag conversation and how people are quick to say you're disrespecting the flag, like you said, disrespecting the military. But it's not about the flag or the military, but it is about this nation. Let's not get that twisted. It's not just about what we're dealing with. It's about the fact that when we say I pledge allegiance to the flag, and we've been saying that for years since we were kids, right? And you think about what that really means. You're pledging allegiance to a country that's supposed to be for you, that's supposed to protect you, that's supposed to hold you up and not put you down and support you, especially in times like this. We shouldn't even have times like this if we were in the type of country that you're asking us to pledge allegiance to. So when someone takes a knee to that, for me, I feel like you're showing direct opposition to the fact that this is not what you're telling me I'm supposed to be getting in my experience here in America. I wonder what you guys feel about that, and how do you feel about, like you talked about, as far as the disparities in knowing what that really means for the athlete's perspective, and why that's so important for them to use that platform that they have, because you have so many eyes watching when this happens, and why that's so important for athletes to continue to speak up and try to find ways to protest.
I feel like with athletes speaking up, especially at the professional level, using that platform is so key just because of the influence that they have on people. Sports, since it's been created, has brought all types of people together. So I feel like them platforms and every race, color, creed, to see that is the best way to get the message out to everybody, so they can at least try to understand, then go right. In the case of like Colin Kaepernick and many other people who've kneeled, in the NFL, but I feel like it's just an attempt to reach as many people as we can.
As Black pioneer and Iowa State football player Jack Trice once said, "I'll be trying to do more than my part. Fight low and your eyes open and towards the play." How the conversation will continue, the solutions, and moving forward. That's next on Project Community: Racism in Sports. The past can have answers to the future. There have been raw moments of emotion and transparency. Now we look forward with hope for what can be created from this movement, dialogue, and for some, new conversations for people who are taking the time to listen. Eldrin Rucker continues the conversation around the reality of necessary change.
Now that we've talked about how frustrating it is to do that, I'm wondering, where do we go moving forward in terms of trying to get somewhere near a solution, especially when it comes to how athletes are viewed and the different things that you guys have to deal with, because it's unfair. It's very unfair. And I know having this out there, having these conversations, right, I know that's important. But as we start to see more and more athletes start to speak out on more things and their experiences and all these issues that we're all dealing with, do you feel like the progress that's being made, for athletes, by athletes, to get to a point where your voices are being heard more, do you feel like it's making a difference? And how can we possibly try to build from here?
With everything that I've seen on Twitter right now, especially with the Iowa football team, I've seen a lot of terrible things, but I've also seen a lot of great things from fans. So that makes me feel like a lot of things have like the ability to get better. But it's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen next year. Like, it's going to take a long time, but every one person that is more supportive than the day before will be better than one less.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, my team has had a talk, and they all are sending things that they have found and learned, and they're sharing it with each other. And I can see all of it, and I think that in itself is like a really big step. But like I said before, I think it has to start with educating yourselves, like people educating themselves on what's going on in the world and like what the issues are with racism and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think if you don't make the choice to educate yourselves, then we're not going to get anywhere, because you're just going to be ignorant to everything that's going on.
Yeah, I agree with that. My thing, like, it's like, it's good when we're having this conversation and things of that sort, but this is something that, people non-color need to do. Like, this, like, we already know, what the case is. We already been through it. Like, this has to be a regularity for them, because they're, for lack of better words, they're the problem. They're the reason this is happening. They need to understand their faults. We need to understand where our faults come from. But it starts with them. They're the main ones that need to be having this conversation, because that's the only way that's gonna make it better, is if they want to make it better. It's not gonna get better if they don't.
I also totally agree, and I feel like a solution that would be effective immediately and make, you know, people that are not of color really look at themselves is, you know, us as Black athletes doing more of what the Iowa football team is doing. Like, you see, they're speaking up and they're actually leaving about it. You know what I'm saying? They're leaving behind their scholarships, their friends, and their teammates for the greater good because they know they're being treated, you know, less fairly and unequal, and they're leaving. If that happened across the board, you know, D1 to D3, especially in the major FBS, you know, Division I programs, if Black athletes started leaving teams consistently over their treatment, man, you know, everybody will be up in flames. Everything will be up in flames because, you know, regardless if you want to ignore the facts or not, Black athletes make money. You know, they make colleges money, and putting a dent and stuff like that and leaving, and, you know, I feel like that would make a lot of people be like, oh, damn, okay, we really are messing up, you know, because they're leaving behind all these resources and all this opportunity, and they really have had enough. So I feel like that's a good example that they're setting.
And could you imagine that? That would be really powerful. And like you said, we're starting to see that. I even saw something on Instagram the other day where the #1 2023 recruit for high school basketball got offers from everywhere. His name's Mikey Williams. And he talked about going to an HBCU. And for a kid being 15 to have that kind of mentality right now, that's a progress mark in itself, right? But when you think about that and what that would truly mean, that could be really effective. But do you think it's realistic? Do any of you guys think that's a realistic solution or something that we could possibly see happen? Because you guys do hold a lot of power just in where you decide to go to school.
I personally don't think that's realistic, because it's just like top Division I schools, they hold so much power, and, you know, with the world is everything so political, and, you know, going here is gonna increase your chances of going professional more so than going here. You're gonna get more looks here. Like, I think it's just too much with that aspect as far as like big sports is like football, basketball, wrestling, things of that sort. Now, when it comes to certain sports like, you know, track or swimming, when it's more time oriented, you know, that you really can hold on your own with those type of sports. But when it comes to like football, things of that sort, getting notoriety and, you know, opportunities and things of that sort, I just don't believe that would be realistic.
So do you feel like that's more of a system problem then? Because if some of those things weren't the case, and if there were more funding for historically Black colleges and there were more opportunity and things like that, you know, that might be a different conversation. But I'm wondering, where does that start? You know, does it start with the athletes making a change? Does it start with athletes continuing to do what they're doing, like how you referenced with Iowa and how they're speaking out and how some, you know, students are leaving? Or does it need to start with the people who write all the paperwork? Does it need to start with the people who put these programs together, the athletic directors? Does it start with them, or does it start with the athletes?
It starts with them. It doesn't start with the athletes, you know. At least that's what I believe, because, you know, these institutions, HBCUs, they're greatly underfunded. You know, they don't have the facilities, they don't have the resources to bring in these top athletes, recruits. You know, if you can't do that, if you can't start there, then, you know, how are you going to get anywhere? You know, just imagine if Howard University was like Iowa, for say, you know, if it was to that magnitude, you know, it'd be a lot different. I believe it'll be a lot more Black athletes going there and things of that sort. But because it's not to that facet, that won't ever happen. And then, especially in the world we live in today, you know, it's not like people going to willingly try to bring them up to that stature. It's going to more so be on us we got to do that. That's why people say, you know, it's on the athletes when it should never be on the athletes to begin with.
I also think a lot of us are very young when we commit to a school that we go to. So it's hard for a lot of people to realize that these are just kids. It has to start with people, like it has to start with adults.
This conversation has been transparent, beautiful, raw, and difficult at times. That's where change happens. I've had the honor of filling in for Elgin Rucker tonight. Elgin cannot be here. He's home supporting his family as they prepare for his grandmother's peaceful decision to pass away. Elgin Rucker created this vision to start a dialogue, to make a change. As a coworker, I watched him pour his heart into something about something he loves, into something that is a necessary truth. As a friend, I also watched as he struggled at the thought of taking a jog out of fear that something may happen to him. Ahmaud Arbery didn't come home. These athletes are people. We are all people trying to find a place to love and to make a difference. This dialogue was the first step. Educating, listening, that's next. Elgin, thank you for trusting me to articulate your vision. Iowa, thank you for listening to perceptions in dialogue that may be new to you, or maybe you just needed to hear it from the people impacted. The people you cheer for, I hope, will continue off the field and court too. Until the next conversation, this has been Project Community, Racism in Sports.